So this is a nice good sized pot. You're going to want something big enough to where it's not going to boil over. And this is 3 cups of sugar and 2/3 cup of cocoa and 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. And first step is we're just going to mix that all together to kind of beat out the lumps in the sugar and to incorporate it all together, because the milk will mix in better and not form a bunch of foam on top of your fudge if you mix it really well. Okay, so you can see I've got my cocoa and my sugar and my salt all mixed together really well with my wooden spoon. Always use a wooden spoon when you're making fudge. And then now I'm going to add in 1.5 cups of milk. And I'm going to turn my burner on to medium-high heat. Your stove might be different than mine. Don't go too hot because you don't want anything burning. And then I'm just going to continue to stir that until it starts to boil. You can see once I've incorporated my milk and stirred everything around, it just looks kind of like a bubbly, thick sludge. Looks gross, but it'll taste great. This is where I'm just going to keep stirring on a medium-high heat until it starts to bubble and boil, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so we've got a good full rolling boil going on. We definitely want to not stir anymore at this point, and the next step is to add your candy thermometer. Okay, I've got my candy thermometer in. You need to know that you need patience for this part. It's going to take a hot second to get up to the temperature that you need it to be. You need it to get to 234, that's your softball stage. Anywhere between 234 and 236, because sometimes you'll notice that your thermometer will go up a degree and then drop back down a degree, and then go up a degree and stay a degree. So you want to make sure that you're definitely above that 234 softball stage. You don't want to get any higher than about 237 or 239. I generally keep mine between 234 and 236. That's a really good consistency for fudge. Candy making is a science, and what you're trying to do is get those sugar molecules to completely break apart, and then you're trying to get the concentration of the water evaporation so that your concentration in your solution is just the perfect amount for the sugar crystals to rebond the way that you want them to. And so that's why the temperature is so important, because that shows, the temperature shows what consistency your sugar solution is at. Okay, you see on the sides of the pan how it boiled up and then has reduced in boil. And so on the sides of the pan there, you've got a lot of yuck. And that can contain sugar crystals, which are sugar seeds, and that is going to mess up your fudge and possibly make it grainy. So a lot of people will take a spatula. I use a silicone. You can use a non-silicone one. I just don't like to get little bristles in my fudge. Dip it in some water and just rub it on the sides. Do not touch your fudge. Oops, my hand's in the way and making the camera do funny things. And you just kind of rub it around until those come off. You don't have to do that, but you do run the risk that your fudge will be grainy if you have a lot of stuff up on the sides. If there are sugar seeds up there, little grains that have not completely dissolved, then they can start a chain reaction in your fudge later, which can make it grainy and gritty and crumbly. Okay, I've got my sides all washed down. Just remember that the more you wash your sides down with water, the more water is going to incorporate into your solution, and the longer it's going to take to get to temperature. Remember that temperature isn't about how long your pot has sat on the stove. It's about how much water has evaporated from your sugar solution. So the more water you add by wiping down the sides, just consider that it's going to take a little bit longer for that temperature to come up to the stage where you need it to be for softball. Okay, I've reached 234, but remember, see how it backed back down to 233? Just give it a little extra time in case it decides to keep fluctuating up and down. If you don't maintain that 234, you're not going to have lovely fudge. It's not going to set properly. And so you really want to make sure that it's going to maintain the 234. I sometimes let it get all the way up to 235. There it goes. That's maintaining. Okay, as soon as we're done and we make sure that we're at a steady 234, I've already got prepared in the sink an ice bath. And I want to bring my fudge right over, being careful not to stir the pot too much, and set it in my prepared ice bath. That's so that I know that my temperature is going to start reducing and it's not going to keep cooking and get to too high a temperature and turn to like a caramelization. So I'm going to leave it in this ice bath for about 2 or 3 minutes. I just want to make sure that I know for certain that it is cooling down. The bottom of my pan is very thick. It's a good high quality pan, and I want to make sure that it's not going to heat the rest of my fudge. It needs to just continue to cool down to room temperature. Okay, we'll need some editing there. I've just added a half a cube of butter and a teaspoon of vanilla. My temperature is at about 200 to 205 right now. I want that butter I want it to be warm enough that my butter is going to melt and pool on top. That's also going to help the sugars to not recrystallize. But I don't want everything vaping off. Vanilla will vape off really easily if you add it when the mixture is too hot. So again, about 200 degrees, and I add my butter and vanilla. Okay, my fudge has now reached the temperature of 110. You want it between 110 and 113. I usually go on the low end, so I try to get right around 110. I'm going to grab my wooden spoon, the one that I used originally, but I'm going to wash it first. Remember those seed crystals that we talked about? We don't want to add any of those into our fudge at this point. So you can see the butter melted on top, and I'm just going to start beating it for a long time. And then I'm going to move it into my prepared baking dish. Okay, here we go. Okay, so just to show you a little bit about what this looks like. There's not enough light in there. I'm going to have to edit this. So it's just gooey. It's like this slimy, gooey, chewy mess right now. It's going to scrape apart. And it's really shiny. You can see that shine. It's really hard to get the butter to incorporate at first. We're just going to keep mixing. Okay, so you can see now that the fudge kind of holds its own, and it's nice and thick. And if I can glob this out, sorry, it's nice and thick and it's keeping its consistency. So it's definitely time to put it over. It's lost its shine and it's keeping its form. After you're done removing your hot chocolate from your pan, I love to just add a little milk and put it back on the stove. And as you stir that and wash the sides down, it makes the most delicious hot chocolate. Okay, so I've lifted my fudge. You just lift the whole parchment paper piece, and you just lift it and set it out. I tipped it upside down. You can see that mine has got these grooves in it. I waited a little long because I was videotaping and my fudge got a little bit thick before I scooped it into my pan. So that's why it's thick like that. It's best to give it a couple of hours to cool. You don't want to put it in the fridge or freezer. Again, you just want to give it time for those sugar crystals to form back together in a way that your fudge is going to be nice and smooth and creamy. So, and then you just take a sharp knife and you're just going to cut it into the pieces that you want and store it in a cool, dry location.